Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to uncover a hidden reality of survival, something operating literally right beneath the surface of everyday American prosperity. We're going to look closely at a massive underground network that rarely makes the headline news, but is absolutely crucial for keeping entire communities alive.
Picture this. Somewhere in America, tonight, a mother is actually pretending she already ate dinner. And why? Just so her kids won't feel guilty grabbing those last two pieces of bread. Now, at that exact same moment, maybe in another part of the country, volunteers are out in the dark, before the sun even comes up, unloading thousands of pounds of food from trucks. They're racing against the clock to feed people they will probably never even meet. You see, this isn't just a feel-good story about charity. This is a story about survival. Because right behind our everyday image of convenience and abundance, there's this invisible army of ordinary people, literally just neighbors feeding neighbors for free, who are stepping up to hold things together.
All right, let's get right into Section 1, the Invisible American Crisis.
47 million. That's how many Americans are living in food-insecure households right now. To put that into perspective, that is roughly 1 in every 7 people in the richest economy on Earth struggling to consistently afford food. And honestly, what's really troubling here is that this crisis has become so completely normalized, a lot of people don't even call it hunger anymore. They use phrases like stretching groceries, or making it work, or just skipping breakfast. But the actual numbers reveal a much darker reality.
And here is the part that really hits hard. Out of those 47 million people, almost 14 million of them are children. We're talking about households experiencing such extreme conditions that the adults are literally skipping meals for entire days just to make sure their kids have something to eat. This isn't some rare, isolated issue. It's a massive, systemic pressure point affecting millions of households every single day.
Now, you might be thinking this only affects people who are unemployed or completely disconnected from society, right? Actually, scratch that. That's a huge misconception. We are talking about working Americans, teachers, delivery drivers, nurses, veterans, college students, even elderly grandparents who are raising their grandchildren. These are people who wake up every morning, go to work, smile at their coworkers, and then quietly wonder if there's going to be enough food at home that night.
This brings us to Section 2, the paradox of abundance.
Every single year, America throws away tens of billions of pounds of food. Let that sink in. Perfectly edible produce gets tossed just because it looks imperfect. Restaurants dump completely untouched meals, and grocery stores throw out products that are still perfectly safe to eat. Yet, at the exact same time all this is happening, 47 million people are struggling, and we're seeing food bank lines wrapping around entire city blocks. A country producing enormous abundance and enormous waste at the exact same time. It really says something profound about modern America, doesn't it?
Let's move on to Section 3, an underground survival network.
So, while the official systems get bogged down by bureaucracy, inflation, and economic pressures, everyday people have stepped up. Millions of ordinary Americans have built what is essentially one of the largest civilian food survival networks in human history. We're talking over 60,000 food pantries and meal programs passing out billions of meals a year. But this whole operation is incredibly fragile. Take a look at this breakdown. 58% of the food bank supply comes directly from private and corporate donations. Only 23% is government emergency surplus, and the remaining 19% comes from direct nonprofit purchases. So think about what that means. If local donors, grocery stores, and just everyday people decided to stop contributing, more than half of America's charitable food ecosystem could collapse almost overnight. This entire parallel infrastructure is literally held together by trust, generosity, and a whole lot of improvisation.
Let's look at the human cost in Section 4, the psychological math of scarcity.
Life in America has gotten brutally expensive, right? Housing, healthcare, childcare, the costs are just exploding, while wages are often completely failing to keep up. Nationally, food-insecure households are facing an annual food budget shortfall that's measured in the tens of billions of dollars. And what that means on the ground is that millions of families are constantly doing this invisible, agonizing psychological math. Imagine looking at your bank account and genuinely having to ask yourself, okay, do we pay rent this month or do we buy groceries? Do we keep the lights on or do we buy enough food for the week?
Or maybe it's, do we refill this crucial medication or do we buy milk? That constant, everyday financial stress, it actually changes people neurologically. Research shows us that prolonged economic insecurity spikes anxiety, depression, and completely disrupts sleep. People living under chronic scarcity literally lose mental bandwidth. Their decision-making deteriorates, families become emotionally strained, And not because they don't love each other, but because the sheer act of survival is entirely consuming all of their psychological energy.
Which leads us to Section 5, Restoring Dignity and Trust.
But here is the incredible thing. Amid all this crushing pressure, human beings are still finding ways to help each other anyway. And it's mostly happening in these hyper-local, grassroots spaces, places like church basements, community centers, and even parking lots. In fact, more than 63% of local food pantries are faith-based or grassroots operated. And I think this quote really hits the nail on the head as to why these physical spaces matter so much. Food is never just food. Food is dignity, food is stability, food is social trust. When millions of people feel completely invisible inside these massive bureaucratic systems, something almost magical happens at local food pantries. People actually talk. Volunteers remember names. You'll see conservatives and liberals sorting vegetables side by side in the same warehouse without arguing. For just a few hours, the internet disappears and real life returns. These programs have accidentally turned into vital emotional infrastructure for our communities.
Just look at the tangible ripple effects that happen when ordinary people choose to care. Providing a meal, that instantly lowers stress, which in turn leads to safer communities. Removing the judgment when you hand someone their groceries, that restores a sense of dignity, which helps stabilize entire families. And just offering simple human connection rebuilds trust. It actually allows children to perform better in school because they finally regain the emotional bandwidth to think about something other than just surviving. The Americans who are out there feeding thousands for free are quietly holding together the very pieces of society that other institutions have frankly failed to protect.
Let's zoom out a bit for Section 6, the future of society.
Okay, we have to acknowledge a really uncomfortable truth here. Charity alone, it cannot permanently solve these deep structural problems. Even the food banks themselves will be the first to tell you that they were never designed to be permanent substitutes for stable wages or affordable housing. We are facing some massive structural fractures right now. Artificial intelligence is completely transforming labor. Housing affordability continues to collapse, loneliness has become a literal epidemic, and digital addiction is just fragmenting our empathy. These are deep, serious fractures, and unless we actually address them, the demand for food pantries is going to rise way faster than communities can sustain.
And that brings us to a really core message. Every civilization depends on invisible cooperation. For decades, our culture has kind of glorified this idea of absolute, rugged independence. But modern economic realities are forcing us to confront the fact that no society survives purely through individualism. Even in the most technologically advanced society in human history, survival ultimately comes down to interdependence. It comes down to whether human beings actively choose to care about each other. Civilizations don't just collapse from economic failure. They collapse when people stop believing they actually belong to one another.
So this all leaves us with one final overarching question. What kind of society does America actually want to become? Are we okay with one where hunger quietly grows behind closed doors while all this abundance just gets wasted? Or do we want a society where communities rediscover that human survival has literally always depended on mutual responsibility? The answer to that question isn't just a political talking point. It's going to shape our trust, our mental health, our democracy, and the future emotional identity of the entire country.
So, the next time you see a volunteer handing out groceries or a local community organizing free food, I want you to remember that you are witnessing one of the largest acts of collective compassion in modern history. It is an invisible army keeping millions alive, one meal at a time. Now, I'd love to turn it over to you. Have you ever volunteered at a food bank, maybe needed some help yourself, or witnessed your own community stepping up during hard times? What do you think all of this says about modern America? Share your thoughts down in the comments below. And hey, if this explainer opened your eyes or made you think a little differently today, subscribe, share it around, and help us bring more attention to the invisible Americans holding this country together. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll catch you next time.